Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Our guest today is Andy Bing, whose greatest passion has always been to publicly demonstrate mediumship, to teach others how to develop their own gifts, and to spread the message of the spirit world. Having spent several years studying at the Arthur Findlay College, Andy works tirelessly as a demonstrator and teacher across the United Kingdom, in Europe, and in parts of Canada and the United States, reuniting people with their loved ones. Andy is a very respected tutor and course organizer at the Arthur Findlay College. He also teaches in-person workshops and online courses, as well as his free Spirit Talk online lectures and downloads. And there's a lot more to discover about Andy, which you'll find out about on his website, which is andybing.com. And personally, I've been so excited about this interview for a long, long time. So I'm so delighted and grateful to say, Andy Bing, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Thank you, Sandra. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today.
Oh, me too. And I was just at the college last week and people were saying, oh, do you know who Andy Bing is? And I thought, yes, I'm going to talk to him.
Don't leave everything you hear, Sandra.
Oh, yeah, it's all good things. I know you are a man that has service in your heart and love for people, and you're my kind of friend to have. So,
thank you.
Sure. So, Andy, how does your story start? If you don't mind giving us a little bit about your background and maybe where you live and how you got into this wonderful field.
I'm from Birmingham in the United Kingdom, which is in the middle of the island. And I guess, the first thing we have to, I think, understand is that for mediumship is a very natural thing. And, I really believe, as do many people, that mediums, they're born, they're not made. So what we mean by that is that when a medium is born into this world, that potential of mediumship, that faculty of mediumship, that part of the soul that can move beyond the physical five senses and perceive and blend with an individual in the spirit world, has to be there. That no one can manufacture that or make that happen. So what you'll find is, and my story is no different, is that for all mediums, that there will always be mediumistic and spiritual experiences that have happened to them throughout their life, and of course I'm no different from that. Funnily enough, my parents kept a lot of things from me until I discovered my mediumship at 18, which I'll talk to you about in a few moments. But for my early childhood, there were lots of different experiences that I had, but that I don't remember, but my family certainly do. In Birmingham, where I lived, I actually live in a place called Bourneville, which is where the Cadbury's chocolate factory is, where the Cadbury's chocolate's made. We had a small two-bedroom terraced house, and upstairs, there was a small landing, and my bedroom as a child was just directly opposite my parents'. And most evenings when they put me down to sleep, I'd be about 1-2 years of age. They'd go to sleep and they'd hear voices coming from my bedroom, conversations. And obviously at that age I couldn't speak, and they were adult voices. But every time, my dad used to come to see what it was and what happened. And every time he used to put his hand on the doorknob to open the door, he always says, that everything went deadly silent. It was just me asleep in the cot. So the spirit world has been with me, and I've had lots of different spiritual experiences. That one, it was a quite profound one that my family told me about later on in my life. But I also remember being at my grandfather's house. Now, my grandmother passed when I was 3 years of age. I met her, but I never really have any memories of her. But what I do remember is that I was always scared to go into upstairs in that house, and definitely scared to go into a bedroom. I never liked being there. And she actually passed away in a bedroom of a kind of critical heart failure, massive heart attack, and she died in my grandfather's arms. And I'm not saying there's nothing negative about the spirit world, but I think I was very aware of that residual energy, of that sadness that was in that room. And I used to sit on the sofa, and and there's always this empty chair in the house because it was just my grandfather, and there'd be like the three of us on the sofa, my sister, my dad, and myself, and this chair opposite would be empty. And I remember sitting there. I used to have conversations with this chair in my mind. I'd be speaking to it, and quite a few years later, I said to my dad, I said, Dad, you know the empty chair there in the house? Whose chair was that? He goes, oh, that was always your grandmother's chair. She used to sit in there every day. That was her chair. So, as a kid, you don't realise what's happening most of the time. It's natural, but that's been there. But it wasn't until I was 18 that I actually discovered my mediumship fully. And would you like me to talk about that part of my life as well?
I'd love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because I don't want to kind of hog up all the time with this with stories, but if you're interested, I'm more than happy to.
Well, Andy, stories are good because myself and other listeners were always, stories are the thing that really have us believe. So I'm more than happy to have you share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share with you. So at the age of 18, I was at school, obviously, and I was getting to the point where it was always expected of me to go to university. That was the expectation, and I was no one in my family up until I went to university much later on in my life in 2010 had even had a university education. So for my family, it was very important for me to go to university. And I was doing a business project at school, a competition, and I was actually headhunted by a large multinational accounting firm who asked me to join their firm as an apprentice straight after school. And 2 years prior to that, so when I was 16, I actually met I'd met a girl, and was having this relationship since when I was 16 to when I was 19. And actually at that age, I'd met her on the internet, which doesn't sound like a big thing now. Lots of people date online and meet people online, but back in 2003, it was actually quite a taboo subject still, especially for a young lad as well. So
that's right. Right.
At the age of 16, she lived in a place called Sheffield, which was about 2 hours away from where I lived. And every weekend, I'd say to my parents, I'm going into town, I'm going to see friends, and I used to get the train up to Sheffield and spend the days in Sheffield with this girl that was my girlfriend at the time. And I did that every weekend for 2 years, and my family never really knew where I was. It was just in the daytime. I'd get back for tea time, so no one had to know any the wiser. And when I got offered this job, the company said, "Well, look, you can get a job in these different cities." So there was Edinburgh, there was London, there was Birmingham, there was Manchester, and lo and behold, there was this thing called Sheffield. I had this opportunity to go to Sheffield, so I decided to actually move to Sheffield, for this job, but also so I could be with this girl that I'd been dating for a couple of years.
Yes.
So at the age of 18, I bought a house, and my dad helped me to buy a little studio flat in Sheffield, which hadn't been built at the time, but I bought this house. There is a point to all of this in a minute. So I bought a house, moved to Sheffield, started this new job, and to build this new life for myself. And within 6 months of moving to Sheffield, that relationship finished. Also, I was an auditor at the time, so I was travelling around different parts of the UK and in Europe, working with big multinational companies doing their accounts. So it was very difficult to make friends. I was never in Sheffield long enough to build friendships. And of course, if you've ever been to an accountancy firm, they're all kind of aging, balding, middle-aged men, really. So as an 18-year-old, it was very difficult to even have friends at work. So I'd lost the only person I knew in Sheffield was her. So I'd lost her, had no real friends in Sheffield at all. And, within the space of sort of 12 months, my work then suffered. I lost the house that I was meant to be living in. And I had a phone call one morning, and my grandfather passed away. So in the space of that 12 months of moving to Sheffield, I really lost everything. And there was one of the most difficult times of my life, very lonely period in my life. And to fill the time, because I mean, I had all this free time, I had no friends, so weekends were very difficult, and you'd work all day, and the evenings were especially difficult. I remember that I used to go walking, aimlessly around the city. I'm not sure if I was looking for her, if I was looking for a new life, if I was looking for an answer to something. But there was definitely something in me at that time that was searching for something more, and I could feel it, and I was trying to find it, but I didn't really know what I was looking for. And one day I actually happened upon a Buddhist center, and I saw these people going in. So I decided to go in myself. And then it happened to be a drop-in meditation center. So I started going there once a week, and at home, every night I'd spend an hour meditating just to fill the time, really. And because I enjoyed doing it, it got me away from the reality of the situation.
Yes.
And weekends, I used to sit in the meditation twice a day for an hour. So over the space of 18 months, I began to really sit regularly in the meditation. And I remember one morning I woke up at home. It wasn't a big revelation. It's not a big, it's a bit of an anticlimax, this part is really, to the story that I've told so far. But I woke up one morning and I just knew I could speak to dead people. I just knew I could speak to the spirit world. And what I think what had happened over that space of that 18 months is I'd built this relationship with myself. I'd had these experiences in the meditation of something greater than myself, and it awakened and brought to the surface this mediumistic quality that was there. Now, when my grandfather, eventually I sort of had to, I broke down and told my parents everything that had happened, and told them about this relationship I was in, and I wanted to come home, and so I left Sheffield in the end. I managed to keep hold of my job, and they transferred me to the Birmingham office because they could see I was desperately unhappy and my work was suffering. So I started a new life in Birmingham, and that's when I went to a local spiritualist church, met my mentor, and the rest is history. I began to develop my mediumship, and within the first ever seminar that I attended to my first public demonstration was only 18 months, I think.
Fantastic.
It was very quick development, but what people don't realise is that I'd done all the hard work, lots of the hard work in bringing it to the surface, in accepting that aspect of myself while I was in Sheffield before I even became or knew that I was a medium. So that's how I got into mediumship, really.
It's really interesting because I believe from everything that I've been taught and trained that the place to go is within. And whether you call it meditation, requieting the mind, even for my own development, I'm seeing how much I don't do that. And I look for answers outside of myself, and it is important to go within.
Well, I mean, this is what spiritualism, it's the religion that I'm heavily involved in. I consider myself to be a spiritualist. People think that spiritualism it's all about teaching or talking to the so-called dead,
right?
And people think that we've got this preoccupation with death and wanting to know about the afterlife, and people miss the point of what spiritualism truly is, because it's not about death; it's actually about life itself. What I think, and this is hopefully will help your listeners and put it into perspective, is that if we can convince people of the reality of life after death through the evidence of mediumship, and it convinces them, or it makes them question for themselves, even if it just makes them question for themselves that reality, then people have to begin to question, well, if my loved one's soul survives physical death, then it means that I have a soul. And the next question then should be, well, if I have a soul, what is that soul? What is it? What is the nature of who I am? And what I see my job as being as a medium is to encourage people and to inspire people to actually look within, and to recognize and uncover and discover the true potential of their own soul. If you look at the story that I gave you, that's what I did unknowingly. is that I looked within and I discovered the true quality and potential of my soul. And what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to encourage people is to go on that personal spiritual journey themselves. And I really believe that the meaning of life is a very simple one. I think people have tried to overcomplicate things, but the meaning of life is very simple. Look within, find the core essence of your soul. What is the essence of it? How is it that you need to express yourself in life, which you can only find by understanding and building a relationship with yourself. And once you've found that, then allow those qualities to determine how you express yourself in life. Often, with students of mediumship, they come wanting to be mediums, but leave being therapists, nurses, business people, because the mediumistic development itself forces them to look within. And once they've listened to that quality and power of themselves, then life changes, because once you know the reality of what your soul needs and how it needs to be expressed in this life, there's a conviction within you that you can't shake that will lead you to express what your soul needs. And I think Nietzsche says this, and he says it well. He says that when you have a why, you can cope with almost any how. And for me, the why, the reason to live, lies within it. It is that quality and essence of the soul. And when you found the why, all the problems that life throws at you, how you actually get to achieve it is possible, and you can cope with it. And that's what happened with me in Sheffield. I found a why in my life, my mediumship, and from that I was able to rebuild a life and an expression that has given me meaning and fulfilled me in life, and continues to do so today.
That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I find through these interviews and through a lot of people that I've met and spoken with that being interested in mediumship, or even from being a recipient, not necessarily being the medium, a lot of times it does come from a pain in our life or some kind of suffering. And it is my personal belief that a lot of times that suffering is kind of what gets us in the door to look at who we are, what our purpose is, do we have a soul, and starts us on our spiritual journey.
Yeah, I mean, when you ask students, when I ask students, what's led you to mediumship, I'd say, this is not a scientific statistic, but I'd say that 2/3 of them have found their mediumship, like I did, through a personal trauma or very difficult set of circumstances. So the first thing that does is that, like Sheffield for me, it's a catalyst that makes you cry out for something. But the problem then is, of course, and I had to go through this myself, is that as soon as you find the expression that you are, you then have to go. The first job is to go about healing the very trauma that led you to that expression. Otherwise, we found and we tried to build our life and that expression on an emotional instability, and we have to first of all heal from that trauma, as well as use it to catapult us into the future and to find the true expression of ourselves.
True. I'm just like mapping this onto my own life and where I am, and none of it would have happened without my personal trauma of my dad dying.
Yeah. So and this is the thing. I mean, I'm sure that if after your father passed, it may have led you to want to see a medium or to see if there is something more.
Yes. And I had studied a little bit before. And what it's interesting to me, and maybe you can shed some light on this, is it feels as if every time I would kind of get back on with my life and not look at this mediumistic point of view or afterlife or things, it felt like there was someone who kept knocking at my door, reminding me that this is the journey that I need to be on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, the first thing I'd say to people, because I'm sure there's lots of people listening that have gone through personal grief or experiencing personal grief and are longing for that communication, to that proof that their loved ones are still alive. Now, my first advice that I'd give everybody is that the communication can be a healing balm and can bring consolation to people. It can console us, and it can be a very healing and moving positive power in our life, but only when it's the right time for that communication to take place. Now, and there's a very close friend of mine who recently lost her mother, and she came to me. We're very good friends. I very rarely give friends and family sittings because I know them too well. And she was desperate, and I said to her, look, I'm happy to do a sitting for you, but not now. It's far too soon. You need to accept the physical loss first. You've got to grieve for the physical loss, because whatever I do and whatever a medium does can never bring back that physical loss. We've lost them physically, and we have to get to a point, I believe, that we've accepted that and we've grieved for that loss physically first. And then once that's happened, and we have the communication, I think it can then be a very healing experience. But what I have seen is, and it's rarely, it's been a couple of times in my life where where people have come for sittings. I remember once, there was when I was about 23 at the time, so we were talking about 10 years ago. A lady came for a sitting to my house. I opened the door, and as soon as I opened the door to her, I was aware of her daughter. So I invited her in, gave her a cup of tea, and I just knew from the spirit world it wasn't the right time to communicate. So I said to her, look, I know you've come for your daughter. She's here. She's safe. She's well. I explained to her what the spirit world was, and answered some questions for her. And I said to her, you please just give it another 6 months and come back, and you'll be ready. And I knew that if she'd had that contact there and then, and I did that for her, it, rather than console her, it would have created a situation in which she would have gone from medium to medium, week after week, trying to keep that connection alive, and to have that, and have her daughter in her life every week. And I don't think that's always healthy. I don't think it's healthy at all. I think we have to live life, and we can never get over a loss of anybody, regardless of who it is. We can never be the same as what we were before the loss, but we have to use that knowledge that our loved ones are there with us, not to cling on to the past and not move on with our lives, but to use it to help us find meaning in the experience and to live a full life ourselves. So I'm a big believer that the mediumship, of course, it's a wonderfully healing experience, but we have to give ourselves time to grieve first.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I've heard of people that are, say, addicted to seeing mediums one after another, but I've never thought of it in that way, that they're just really trying to hold on.
Yeah, I think when it happens too soon, it can interfere in the grieving process itself. So it stops us from accepting that they've actually physically left, because the sitting can be a physical experience in itself. In fact, we're sitting there with somebody, they're talking about our loved one, and we can even feel sometimes, should be all the time, we can feel the presence of them through that power. So I'm not trying to warn people off sittings. I'm just saying, go when you feel ready, and allow yourself to grieve, that for that physical loss of the person first. But saying that, Sandra, I went to a demonstration. I did a demonstration last week in a place called Rugby, and the second contact that I gave was to a lady who's lost her mother, and the information, it was I wouldn't have thought she'd only passed away 4 hours ago. She'd only been in the spirit world 4 hours, and she came back to communicate to her daughter to let her know that she had arrived safely and she was there, and she was a very strong communicator. So again, I'm not saying there has to be a fixed time for that. Obviously, the spirit world felt that her daughter, that mother felt that her daughter was ready for that communication. And she'd only passed that morning, and in the evening she was there in the spirit world.
Well,
Uh,
isn't that interesting? Because there's so many people have speculate on how long it takes, and who knows what the answer is, but it's really interesting to hear that.
yeah.
Andy, do you believe that our energy as the sitter has anything to do with an effective medium reading, or maybe you can say a little bit from the spirit person's point of view what it
Yeah.
takes to do that? Because I can just imagine if somebody is grieving terribly, I mean, it might not be possible to have that connection.
I mean, the first thing is, and I think I think I need to say this to clarify a few things. Is like, for instance, when that lady came to me for a sitting, and I was aware of her daughter, I knew as the medium, I knew that it wasn't the right time to communicate. So often people go for sittings when they've just lost their loved one, and their loved one doesn't come in the sitting. And I think one of the reasons for that is that it's not the right time, and it doesn't. It's not just the right. Has to be the right time for the recipient. It also has to be the right time for the communicator as well. And I think so. I don't want people to start worrying. Oh, do I have a sitting? Do I not have a sitting? When is the right time? You go when you feel ready, and if it is the right time, then the communication will take place. If it isn't the right time, whether for yourself or for the communicator, you may get a sitting. It might be someone else that comes from the spirit world, but you might not hear from your loved one. That doesn't mean your loved one doesn't love you. It just means perhaps at that point it isn't the right time for the communication to take place. So I just want to make that clear. For the sitter, I do believe that sometimes, you see, I remember another sitting that I had. A lady had travelled from a place called Norwich to my house in Birmingham, which is a 6-hour drive, and that doesn't sound a lot in America and in Canada, but in England, a 6-hour drive is a long way.
It is a long drive, no matter what. Yes.
Exactly. So she'd lost a son in the spirit world, and she'd driven all this way to see me. And when she got to me, I was aware of her son. The sitting just wouldn't work. Nothing would work. I just couldn't get the evidence to move forward and to happen. So I said to her, it's very difficult for me, but I said after about 3 or 4 minutes, I said, look, I'm sorry, I don't want to waste your time. I'm a very honest person, but this isn't working. And I said, and it dawned on me. I said to her, can I ask, have you been really, building this up, the expectation up in yourself? Have you really been kind of? She was like, well, I saw you demonstrate a few months ago in Norwich, and since then, and even today, and all day, I've been praying, and I've been, longing for this contact from my son, and I was aware of his son, but just contact wouldn't work. And I said, well, partly, and it was very difficult. I can't really remember what I said to her now, but what had happened is that she'd created this expectation and this tension that it overwhelmed everything. It wouldn't allow the power to build because she was so tense and expectant. So what happened is I actually said to her, well, I'm actually in Norwich again next week. If you'd have told me you was coming from Norwich, because I didn't know you was coming from Norwich, I'd have told you not to come, and I'd have seen you next week. So I ended up giving her a sitting the week after. I did it free of charge for her because it's a long way to drive for nothing. The sitting worked beautifully, but then she had no I think she had no. Well, I think she probably thought I was a bit rubbish and had no expectation about what was going to happen. And yet, a son then came through, and it was a wonderful experience for both of us. So I think part of the problem can be when we build up these expectations and it can become very tense about it. It can affect the sitting. What I think is the best sort of sitter is somebody that has no expectation. They're just happy to have an experience. They're relaxed and not nervous, so that then means there's not a tension that's there, but the recipient, relaxes with you, wants to work with you and work as a team, not in terms of the evidence, but in terms of giving of energy with each other. And thirdly, a recipient that has an open mind and has a good memory. Often that can be a difficulty in sittings and in demonstrations, is that we see some people just can't remember things. You know, they haven't got a good memory about, what ornaments their loved ones had, or what happened on a particular day, or they can't remember their memories of their past are fragmented. I mean, I've had some people that, I've met people that can't remember anything for the first 10 years of their life, so all that becomes a difficult thing. I once gave a sitting at the college to a lady who was in her 90s, and I thought, oh, we might have a bit of difficulty here because she was a very old lady, and yet she had this mind that she could remember the minutest of details about a childhood, about her loved ones, about everything really. And the sitting was fantastic because she knew so many people in the spirit world, and she knew a lot about them. So the spirit world had so much to work with. I had more to work with, but I've had difficult sittings because it can be because of me. Sometimes I can't move my awareness to the spirit world in that moment, or only to a lesser degree than I normally can. But I've had difficult sittings as well because for some recipients, they don't just come wanting to hear from certain people in the spirit world. They come wanting to hear specific pieces of evidence about specific people in the spirit world. And if you don't talk about those things, they won't open their mind up and work with you because they're demanding something very specific. And sometimes it's not possible for the spirit world to be able to manifest that in the moment. And that can be a problem too.
Wow, I've never thought about that expectation like that, and that could cause something like that. And I've been to groups that I always go in with the prayer, or even like platform demonstration. Let the person who needs it the most get the reading, get the communication. And that's kind of how I sit in it. Personally, yeah, would it be nice to hear from my dad or my grandmother or something? Yes. But I try to put that aside and think of another person. So that expectation really is powerful.
Yeah, I mean, you see, in the demonstrations, I'm a big believer that it's not the person in the audience with the greatest need that gets a contact. I'm a big believer that it's actually the person in the spirit world with the greatest needs that communicates. So as the medium in a demonstration, and this may sound a bit strange, but my first allegiance, if you like, or my first concern isn't to help the people in the audience. It's actually to help the people in the spirit world, because I know that the ones that come have the greatest need to communicate to their loved one. And that's why, it's not just me that teaches this, it's lots of teachers that teach this. As the medium in the demonstration, you have to become aware of your communicator first. And because if you become aware of your communicator first and then find who you are with in the audience second, then you're giving the spirit world complete freedom to decide amongst themselves in that demonstration, in that particular moment, who has the greatest need. And you let the one with the greatest need come. So when you're communicating in a demonstration, you're communicating with the people in the spirit world that really need to get their message across the most. And you let the spirit world decide that. And then, of course, the secondary of that then is that you can help people in this world as well. But in the demonstration, my main goal is to meet the need of the communicator, not the need of the audience. In a private sitting, it's very different, you see, because my job in the private sitting is to meet the need of the recipient. And what people don't realize is that they don't always know what they need. You see, there's I'm sure you know, and I'm sure your listeners know, there's two different levels that we work on as mediums. There's what we call the psychic level and what we call the mediumistic level. And the mediumistic level is where my soul blends with the soul of a communicator in the spirit world, a loved one in the spirit world. And through that blending and becoming, I tell the life story, or part of the life story, of that person who's passed away. The psychic level, it's become a bit of a dirty word really, but it's an absolutely beautiful thing, and it has a very important place, because the psychic level is where my soul blends with your soul, the recipient's soul. And by blending there, I'm able to tell the life story, or again, part of the life story, of the person who's sitting in front of me. Now, if you have a person, for instance, like me, when I left Sheffield broken, I just lost my job, I just lost my house, I just lost, my grandfather. My whole life had crumbled. I needed help. I didn't need to hear from Aunt Betty or from my uncle
Right.
Al. What I needed someone to do was to blend with my soul and help me to understand what I'd gone through, how it was affecting me, the potentials that possibly could be there if I allow them to happen to move forward in the future, to give me some direction and support with what I was going through. So when people come with an expectation, they come wanting to hear from a loved one, for instance. It might be that they want to hear from a loved one, but at the same time, they're going through a very difficult divorce, and they're just about to lose, the family's breaking up. So they might want to hear from their dad or their mum or the grandparent, but what they need, what's more important at that moment to their soul, is help with dealing with the breakup of their family now. So although they expect a loved one to come from the spirit world, we actually should be working psychically to help fulfill the need of them. And then later on, maybe the mum and dad might come. But the other thing people have to realise is, and it's all about expectation, and it's all about understanding the process. Let's say, for instance, you've got a person who's just lost a business, but they really want to hear from their mum in the spirit world. But their father was a businessman who, had bought and sold businesses all his life. Although the recipient might want to hear from the mom, the dad will come because he'd be a better person to help them understand the problems they're going through now in life. So as a recipient, this is why I'm saying we shouldn't really expect anything, because it's all about letting the spirit world and the medium on the psychic level help you to fulfill what your need actually is. And sometimes your needs, my needs, and my wants can be very different from one another. I think this is where mediums have difficulties, because we can easily get into a habit or a mindset of wanting to appease the sitters, wanting them to have a good experience, wanting them to think that we've done a good job for them. So we move to talk about what they want, but it's our job to talk about what they need. So for me, as long as I've said what they need, and then it's not, even if it's not what they want, I'm happy. They might not be so happy, but I am, so that I feel I've done my job properly. Then, you see.
Yes, I've spoken with many people who have, even let's say a doctor that has an anesthesiologist is coming to mind, and he says just before he puts people under for surgery, all that's there are the regrets and what they should have done and shouldn't have done. And, I was so passionate about this, but never followed through. And there's so many regrets. And I think personally, by visiting a medium, whether you're using your mediumistic abilities or psychic abilities, you can help people make the most of their path here on earth. Yeah. And so it's not about having those regrets. You're really helping people live. It's not about just talking to the dead. I mean, the whole point behind it, even behind this show, much as I love the titles, We Don't Die. Yes. Much as I love talking about that, every single thing that I do is about helping people have a better life.
Yeah. I mean, and this is what I really believe, the mediumship is all about. When I lost my grandfather, it made life very difficult for me. And I'm sure people, I'm fortunate enough that I haven't lost my mum or my father, but mum and dad are both still alive. My sister's well. I'm yet to go through a major, my grandparents, I love my grandparents dearly. My grandmother's 91 now. She's still here with us. She's been around all my life. I love her dearly. But in a way, when you lose your grandparents, you sort of expect that to happen to you, because it's the natural order of things, isn't it? I expect one day to lose my parents. I expect to lose my grandparents.
Yes.
But even when I go through the loss of my own granddad, it made life very difficult for me to see the future. I was caught up in grief, and I'm sure, my heart goes out to people who lose children, because it's not natural. It's not part of the natural order of how things should be. And and even when you lose a partner, or even if you lose your mum and dad, it's still very difficult. All this stuff is. But my point is that when the grief, it's there to help heal the grief, but the grief it's also there to help us to get back on the horse and live. And part of what our work is to do is to encourage people to, as you said, to live the best life that they can, and to realise that although they might think they're on their own, that love they've shared with their loved one can never die. It doesn't die. And that love can also be used then in a positive way, to harness, to fulfill our lives going forward. And I think that's the beauty of what we do. And I think people sometimes forget that that's the important thing, to live. And our loved ones, that's what our loved ones want for us. They don't want us to sit in grief and in mourning for the rest of our lives. They want us to go out there and rinse every moment that life has to give us, to wring it dry, and to have the best, most fulfilled life that we can, so that when we go to the spirit world, we're as relatively perfect as we can possibly be.
Do you think it makes a difference how we live our life now as to how we are in the spirit world?
Yeah, completely. No, this is very much spiritualist teaching, and I can only go from the tradition that I'm involved in myself.
That's perfect.
But as a spiritualist, we understand that the soul is a living power that changes with every action, every thought, and every deed, and the vibration of our power, therefore, is a reflection of the aggregate of all of our thoughts and actions and deeds in life. And that's important because there's a universal law that like attracts like. And so when we move to the spirit world, when we physically die, the condition of our soul, the vibration of our soul at the point of death, will determine our initial experiences in the spirit world. And we don't believe as spiritualists in a static afterlife. If you look at traditional Abrahamic religions, so Judaism, Islam, Christianity, their teachings in life after death, they portray a very static afterlife. So in the Christian tradition, for instance, when you die, you go to, well, let's talk about Catholicism particularly. That's probably an easier one to talk about. Is that when you die, well, let me start from the beginning, if that's okay.
Sure.
Quick with this as it can be. When you do something wrong in life under the Catholic teaching, what the Christianity says is that you impair your relationship with God, so that when you sin, you fall out of God's favour. And the way that what we then have to do is we have to restore our relationship with God Himself. So what for the Catholic, what they do is they go through the sacraments. They will confess, they will repent, they'll do their penance, and once they've done that, they've put themselves into a condition which God may then, through His grace, resolve them and forgive them of their sins, and in doing so, will restore that relationship again. There's a restoration of that relationship between them and God. Mm-hmm. Now, for the Catholic, when you die, if you've sinned and not repented, you go to a place called hell for eternity, which is forever, for eternity. If you've sinned and you've done your penance and you've repented, but you've not been given the grace of God, you end up, until a few years ago, you ended up in a place called purgatory. Purgatory has now been abolished from Catholic teaching, but for thousands of years, you ended up in a place called purgatory, which is like hell, but you have the opportunity on the last day, the day of judgment, that you might potentially go to heaven. If you've been a good person and that relationship with God hasn't been it's remained intact. It hasn't been compromised. You'll go to heaven for eternity, forever. So it's a very static afterlife. You go to a place and you stay there forever. What spiritualism has always taught through the teachings of the spirit world is that when you're not judged by God, you judge yourself. And the power that you are, the vibration of your soul, you can't hide from that. You are what you've created. When you lose the physical body, you're known by your light, by that power that you are. And your actions and thoughts and deeds in this life will determine a vibration, which, as I said, determines your initial experiences in the spirit world. So if you've led a life that's been one of destruction and negativity, then you'll attract people that are just like yourself. If you lived a life that's been half good, half bad, you'll attract people like yourself. If you've lived a life that's been one of relatively perfection, you'll attract people like yourself. Now, we understand the spirit world to be a dynamic afterlife. That is, that we continue to refine ourselves intellectually and morally in the afterlife through being of service to people in this world and through being of service to other people in the spirit world. And so we're able to change the vibration and refinement of ourselves after death. And that will then change our experiences in the spirit world as we become relatively more perfect and move towards that power of creation itself. So for me, life is very important, because my spiritual unfoldment will either allow me to become relatively more perfect or relatively less perfect. And I understand that will have an impact on the first experiences that I have in the spirit world. But I also realise that if I make a mess of my life, and I've had a very difficult life because of my own choices, then I'm still able to move forward and progress and to find myself. So that's really that's the tradition that I come from, and that's really why spiritualism places so much emphasis on life.
I subscribe to that as well, and I think it was Silver Birch who said something like service is the coin of the spirit world, and that tells me in this life and in the next, anytime we can set our focus on contributing to someone else, it's so important, and that gives us life.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, what I want to get across to people, and I try and shout this from the rooftops, is that to be of service isn't to be a medium or to be a healer or a speaker or have to use a particular spiritual gift that we see as spiritual gifts. A business person is of service to people. They provide them with the means through which they can express themselves and live their own lives. So people that own businesses are spiritual people. It's a very I think business, if you place the right ethics and have the right intention, is just as spiritual as something as mediumship that I do, because you can affect the world, you can affect the local community, you can give people the means to actually fulfill their potential, you can develop people. So every single expression in the world, in this world, there is a potential to serve. The only thing that I think we have to be careful of is that we don't get dragged into this materialistic consumerism in which we are willing to trample over people to obtain wealth and power in the world. That's the corrupting aspect of the physical, really. But we can still have a good life, still be successful, even still be wealthy, but do it with the right intention and in it with a spiritual way to move forward.
Beautiful.
So I don't want people to think that to be spiritual you have to be involved in some sort of religious or mediumistic expression. You can find service and be spiritual in any expression and in your own life if you apply the right principles and ethics to what you do. That's what I believe.
Yeah, and it's not about being poor and giving every cent away to charity and things like that either.
No, because the thing is, let's be honest, humility, which if you look at humility is one of the highest principles that people trying to attain. I mean, Jesus, the idea of Jesus was he was the epitome of humility. To be humble isn't just to think that you're not good at anything and that you're worthless, because that's just having low self-esteem. Humility is about knowing you're good at something, knowing you're special and unique at something, but knowing that you don't have to go onto the rooftops and shout about it, that you can just allow your work and yourself to talk for itself. And so it's about trying to understand these religious ideals that we've been conditioned to believe, and we've been part of our culture. There's nothing wrong in them. There's nothing wrong in any religion. It's part of the fabric of our society, and it's the way that we think about life. But it's about putting them into a context of our own lives, and seeing how we can fulfill those virtues without having to relinquish everything that we've had. I don't think, for me personally, shutting ourselves away in a building and not being part of the world is a way of being spiritual. It is for some people. It's what they need to find that power. But even Jesus himself, if you look, and Muhammad, Moses, all the great prophets and seers of the past have been people that have been in life. They've been with the poorest people, with the people that have been marginalised, with those that have been looked over and frowned upon, and they've helped to actually spiritualise those people and show them that they are important in the world. And that's what I think we have to do today, in whatever expression that we possibly can.
Yeah, and it could be the simplest things. Like you said, not everybody is going to be a medium, but, even from down to a smile or lending a hand to someone, it all helps. But Andy, based on time, this hour always goes so fast. I would like to talk about you a little bit, and about, I was on your website this morning quite a bit, and I thought, you are a teacher, you are a giver, and if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about the services you offer, because I do believe you still do private sittings, as well as maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the things you offer.
Yeah, so I do, most of my work really is demonstrating and teaching mediumship. In America, I do what's called a progressive group, which is where we have 16 students that we all train together for a minimum of a year. And once that group is formed, that those 16 people then get the opportunity to continue their training for the next year, and so on. Because one of the things I've found with training of mediumship is that when you do one-off seminars, and you do them regularly, you get regular students that want to come and learn. But every time you get a new person join the group, you have to start from the beginning again to help that new person to understand where you're coming from. So people that are serious about the development, they're looking for something regular training, but also something that gets progressive, where we can move forward as a group and receive more advanced teaching. So a lot of my time now is providing regular training for people in these sorts of progressive groups. So in America, for instance, we do one on the West Coast in Los Angeles, and also one on the East Coast, which is divided into two places. There is Florida, and I know Chicago is not seen as the East Coast, but we've also got one in Chicago as well. So we do one seminar for that year in Florida, the other one in Chicago. So there's those two progressive groups. We also do an online version of those as well. We actually live stream the in-person seminar. So if you can't actually attend the in-person seminar, but you want to, but you can still view it from the comfort of your own home, and do the exercises as we're doing them in the class through our online platform with other online students. So all the details, there's lots to it. There's online tutorials, there's assessments, there's lots to that program. You can find all the details of that on my website. In September, we're also doing a seminar in. I'll be doing a seminar in Seattle, which is also on the website.
Great.
We also do some online courses, which they've actually all finished now, but they're regularly updated and advertised on the website. So I mean, everything's on the website really. There's also free articles that I write that I'm really a big believer in trying to share knowledge with people. So lots of the teachings that I give, I always do free talks online called Spirit Talk, which the next one's on the 27th of June. So you can find that on Facebook and on the website as well. And that's an hour-long talk where I just talk about different aspects of mediumship development. They're completely free to join. You just have to register because we've got a limited amount of people we can have on the online platform. And the articles you can download off the website.
Wonderful. Are you progressive groups? Could somebody who's a newcomer, are they welcome to join?
Yeah, I mean, what I encourage with people is obviously for this is the first year that we're doing the progressive groups. So I'll be taking the groups from the beginning really,
okay,
as beginners. So when we form a new progressive group, I take people back to the basic things, and then as we go through the training, it gets progressively more difficult. Once the groups are established, there may be one person or a couple of people that will be added a year if for whatever reason people can't continue. For those people, when we add new people, they would have to have been to the same level as everybody else in the group. Otherwise, it's not fair. And that means not just with their experience with mediumship, but with an understanding of my teaching as well. So usually when we replace people, they're already regular students that have been a few times to different courses. So really, if you're interested in the progressive groups, now's the time to get involved with them.
Oh, that's exciting. So we can share that because they're starting. I see the dates for 2019. So that's exciting. And I know, like me, mediumship keeps knocking on my door, even though I keep setting it aside. It keeps knocking on my door. Oh, Andy, and could you speak a little bit about you teaching at the Arthur Findlay College?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a tutor now for quite a few years. I mean, the college is a very special place. It's not just its history, but that place does things to people. You know, when you go there for a week's intensive course, you really go on a journey, and you have the highs, the lows, but it's definitely a place where people do grow and find themselves. I actually run two courses there each year. My next course that I'll be running there is in August. It's called the Festival of Mediumship. I'll be the course organizer and teaching on the course. There's also a couple of colleagues that will be joining me. One of which is John Johnson, and the other one will be a tutor called Andy Manship. So the three of us will be taking the course. The Festival of Mediumship it's a new course. It's the first year that I'll be running the course, but I'm quite excited. We've got in the mornings people from different spiritual disciplines teaching on meditation. So we have a Swami from the yogic faith that will be coming to do a meditation and a talk. There's a scientist that will be doing some scientific tests on how the brain changes during meditation using state-of-the-art technology to look at brain waves and what's happening in the brain as people meditate. There'll also be, hopefully, you'll have a talk from me and be a talk from the other team members. And there's also hoping to have a Tai Chi teacher that will come. He's not definitely confirmed yet, but almost there now. So we'll have on the lawn a morning of Tai Chi as well, which is obviously a meditation in movement. So it's all based on the meditation in the morning sessions with different speakers. During the rest of the day, then it's to group work with developing your mediumship. And then on the evening, we have an entertainment. We have some different entertaining evenings to socialise and become part of a community. So it's always fantastic weeks at the college. I love being there. So hopefully some of you listeners might want to join us on the course as well.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. I just spent last week at the Arthur Findlay College, so I know that feeling. It's like a feeling of being home. Andy, do you have just a couple more minutes? I have one more question I wanted to ask, but I want to be mindful of your time. Could you just speak of sitting in the power, and maybe as it relates to myself and our listener, is there a practice that we can start doing ourselves just in the comfort of our own home to start building that relationship with the spirit world?
Yeah, I mean, sitting in the power is a name of a meditation that it's used widely by different teachers. That they have that everyone has their own sort of version of it, but essentially it's the structure to the meditation and the kind of the purpose of it is the same. So what we have to understand with development of mediumship is that not every meditation is good for mediumistic development in itself. So these sort of guided meditations, for instance, where you're taken to a park and you look at the lake and you have an ice cream and you sit on a bench and they take you around this journey of this park. Those sorts of meditations are great for relaxation. They're great for visualization, but they're not really good for mediumistic development. The same with, the meditation that I started with was a mindfulness meditation, which is great for developing a relationship with the self. But those sorts of mindful meditations don't go far enough in that they don't actually allow you to take your mind to the spirit world and build a relationship with the spirit world as well. So a good meditation for mediumistic development has two parts. The first part is to look within the self and to discover those qualities and potentials of the self that are there, and to actually be very honest with yourself and to build a relationship that is honest and loving. But as I've said, honesty is the key word. And the more you do that, the more that power of you becomes a reality, the more it comes to the surface, the more of an awareness you have. And it's not an easy time. It's not an easy journey to go through. You're going to have highs and lows. It's like a roller coaster because you have to celebrate certain qualities that you have manifested already that you perhaps don't always acknowledge. So there's a celebration of the self in a sense. And there's also experiences that you have to go through where you have to relive difficult past traumas and difficult situations to help us to accept them, find stability in them. And then once we found stability in them, we can then draw upon them to help other people through the mediumistic and psychic work. The second part of the meditation is about really moving our awareness to the spirit world and building a relationship with that world. And that's not to really have a communication with another communicator from the spirit world. It's not a time to, for instance, to commune with your own loved ones or somebody else's loved ones. It's a time just to sit in the power of the spirit world and allow yourself to become a part of that world. And in doing so, you begin to allow that world to become a reality. And once that happens, not only do you allow the spirit world into your life in a much more natural way because it is real to you, you also are able then to harness that power to heal yourself, to use it to motivate you in through life, to use it to draw upon, to get you through the difficult times. And what you'll find is as you begin to sit and develop that sort of meditation, you will have occasionally spiritual experiences that are very profound and moving. However, it's important that we don't go looking for those or expecting those sorts of experiences. We just sit in the power and have an awareness of that power and expect nothing really. The less we expect, often the more we receive. So the sitting in the power is a meditation, but it's also a way of being able to become aware of different energy and to hold our mind in that power and allow it to become real to us. And that's really the foundation of all the development of every medium.
Thank you for that. And on your website, which is andybing.com, there's a download PDF that you can read, actually called Sitting in the Power, which is free. So I thank you for that. Yeah. Love free things.
Everyone does. I do too.
But it helps, Andy, because I always think about sitting in the power like I'm looking at my mobile phone. I wouldn't, what would happen if I don't recharge it and I don't plug it in? And I think that sitting in the power is something that is for our soul, creating that power.
And I think, the thing is, if you, have met a partner, you're romantically involved and you want to build a relationship with that person, you have to invest time and energy into it. And it's the same with wanting to build a relationship with the spirit world and a relationship with yourself. We have to find the time to invest in that relationship and for a true friendship to grow through that experience. I'll leave you with this perhaps. The best friends that I have in life are actually in the spirit world. Now, those that I've worked with for the last 15 years of my life, nearly half my life, I've built a genuine friendship with them where they are real to me. It's not that I have to see their faces or know their names. I don't know what they're called or what they did in life. I don't know them by their names or what they look like physically. I know them by their presence and the essence of who they are. And those are the people that when I go through difficulties in my life and through my mediumship, that I draw upon their help and their support. And, I don't get answers from those people in the spirit world immediately. We don't have a personal conversation. I send my thoughts to that power and to them. And, it might be a month later, it might be a year later, it might be the next day. I will get my answers, but they don't come directly through the meditation. They may come through another medium. It might be that, there's been times I've just been drawn to a book and I've looked through the pages and the answer that I've asked the question, the answer to the question I've asked the spirit world is there. It may be through a contact. It may be through my own inspiration that something comes and that the thoughts are there in my mind. But there is a conversation that you can have, and it's not just you or your imagination. If you build that power, it will become a reality.
That's fantastic. Andy, thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts for being our guest today.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, Sandra. And if I can do anything for you in the future, I'm more than happy to. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. And for our listener, you can go to andybing.com, which is Andy and then BYNG.com to find out more. And I'm excited for the opportunity sometime, whether it's at the college in Stansted or somewhere else here in the States or abroad, to meet you in person, Andy.
Yeah. I hope our paths cross at some point.
I kind of think they will.
Perfect.
For our listener, I want to thank you for spending this hour with Andy Bing and myself. As always, our home base for this radio show is WeDon'tDieRadio.com, where you can find over 265 hours of interviews, not only talking about the reality of the afterlife, but as Andy and I spoke about, why this is important to your life and to find your passions and find your connection with the spirit world and really have a life worth living. So WeDon'tDieRadio.com. There's a few free gifts there for you as well. So in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain, and I've been your host on We Don't Die Radio. And I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is important. So I'm really left with making the spirit world my best friends. That's very inspiring what Andy just said at the end here. And I hope you look at that too and learn more about sitting in the power. So really want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.